And I want to start with the Philadelphia 76ers because I think in adding Gershon Yabashele and being the team that, with the cap ramifications, that $2.5 million buyout does count against their cap, paying him a salary as well. Like they were the team willing to spend the money. Is he an all-star? No, but that is a good NBA player. That is a solid NBA player who I think can be a good 4 for them coming off the bench, playing between Paul George and Joel Embiid. I really, really like that fit. And if you look at their 8, Embiid, Maxey, Paul George, Caleb Martin's there. You have Yabashele.
Kelly Oubre.
You have Kelly Oubre. You have Kyle Lowry. You have Andre Drummond. You add Eric Gordon. That's like 10 guys that I like, Wes. And I think this team, KJ Martin on a flyer perhaps still. You still have like room maybe for a trade down the line at some point. I wouldn't put it past it or more. But this team just has a really good rotation at a level that, like, this is a championship level core to me now. This is a championship level rotation to me now.
No doubt about it, right? I mean, they're the winners of the offseason. We could talk. I think NBA nerds love to make like the Thunder the winners of the offseason because they added Isaiah Hartenstein, who's awesome. They added Alex Caruso, who's awesome. But the Sixers added Paul George, and that matters more than any Alex Caruso or any Isaiah Hartenstein that you can add, right? They set out with a goal to use their cap space on a max player, and they did that. And then they did that, and they stole a key rotation piece from a rival in Caleb Martin. They added a guy like Eric Gordon. They bring back Kyle Lowry. This team is deep. They've got guys on value contracts, and they have a guy who can potentially win MVP again in Joel Embiid. So let's frame what we're trying to do here. Basically, we've already set the Celtics and the Thunder aside, right? Those are the teams with the I guess we can call them the deepest teams in the NBA, with the best top 5, best top 8, the deepest, best rotations in the league. They fit well together, etc. Which one of these other teams that we're about to talk about can kind of get to that same level? Maybe by the end of the season, we're talking about them at the same level as the Celtics or the Thunder in terms of depth and quality rotation players. So I think the 76ers are very much there. If we're talking about just the teams in the East, I would have them as the second best rotation in the East. I would have them as my second deepest team in the East. I think the Knicks would be the other team that you could put here. To me, what it comes down to is we could talk about the Yabaselis and all this kind of stuff all we want. Do we value the top kind of 4 part of this top 8 rotation more than we value that next kind of tier of guys, that middle group of the rotation, the guys 4 through 8 in the rotation who play important roles in that rotation, but might not be at the end of the day as important as the guys at the top of each of these rotations? And I do tend to value the guys at the top of the rotation more than the guys in that 4 to 8 range, although those guys are important. But because I value those guys more, I would have Philadelphia over the Knicks. I think every Knicks fan is going to sit here and say, we're the deepest team in the East. We're maybe outside of Boston. We're deeper. Look at what we got. We got Mikal Bridges. We're bringing back OG Anunoby. Look at all these things we did. And I would still just say, yeah, but Philly added Paul George and you added Mikal Bridges, and Paul George is just better than Mikal Bridges, right? And Joel Embiid is just better than Jalen Brunson. I love Jalen Brunson. But Jalen Brunson's not winning an MVP anytime soon, as close as he got last year. I like Julius Randle. I like Tyrese Maxey more than I like Julius Randle, right? Philadelphia's best 3 is still better than the Knicks' best 3. And then it's, okay, well, can the guys sort of in the caboose kind of back them up a little bit more and close the gap between them and Philly and between the Knicks and the Celtics, obviously? Yeah, I guess you can make an argument there, but I'd still take the Sixers roster over the Knicks roster.
And in thinking about Philly, West, like, I think the thing that if I want to identify like a part of it, because I like it, and I do like it better than the Knicks as of right now. I think just because of the fit, and I think that's what I just love about what they're doing here, and I think that's part of the lesson here. It's like, okay, I think if I'm a GM of a team, well, like, I might have preferences of what I want out of a star player, right? But the goal is ultimately get star talent in any shape and size and position through your door. Like, that is your job, right? Mm-hmm. You can't be too picky unless you're like, I mean, the Knicks are maybe the team that has decided to be picky and it's worked, or the Lakers, but like most teams, the vast majority of teams in the NBA cannot be picky about how you get star talent in the door. You just have to do it. Philly, understanding that, didn't try to like recreate a Houston team that Morey built to in this situation and just like have Embiid work in that. They said, okay, how do we build the best team for Joel. Hitting on Maxey, obviously a bit of luck, a bit of really good player development work, and a bit of seeing unrecognized talent. That is obviously a big part of that because you have this dynamic scoring guard to take some of the pressure off Joel to manufacture points for you play after play. When you go through the rest of the guys, Paul George is perfect for Maxey, who's also a star, could be an all-star this year. And everyone else on that roster is just like, okay, they can shoot, they can dribble a little bit, they have good size for their position. It's just about, and then Yabusele, I look at him and it's like, okay, you have a guy who's going to play hard as shit, who's going to play the four for you, can body some of the fours, I could see them trying to use him on centers at times, just and let Joel roam and play some help and clog up the paint that way. Everything to me, when you look at this, and this is the biggest thing I think I can say about this offseason for them in this rotation, is that they understood what their stars are and said, how do we build for that? They didn't try to shoehorn in guys that didn't fit. And I think sometimes, Wes, we do see teams, not as much recently, I think, because the league has gotten smarter, but there was an era where good teams would get the veterans that were just named veterans and hope it'd work. Philly did the opposite of that, and they could I think that is the biggest credit I can say about what they're doing here.
Well, they did a little bit of a mix of both things, right? They got the name veterans and a guy like Eric Gordon and Kyle Lowry, but all these guys have very valuable playoff experience, and they're not relying on them to necessarily even start, right? It's just like, hey, these are just guys that we want in our locker room. Pat Riley likes to call these kinds of guys shields and swords. It's like, we just need shields and swords, right? We just need weapons. And those guys are weapons. They're not, relied on every night starters. To your point earlier, you don't get to choose your superstars in the NBA. You don't, right? You end up with James Harden. If you're Daryl Morey in Houston, you get this swindle of a trade from Oklahoma City. You end up with James Harden. You realize what this guy can do in isolation, and you say, what can we do to double down on his talent? Then you end up with basically the opposite player in Joel Embiid, a lumbering center who's a post player, and you say, what can we do to maximize Joel Embiid? And you tried a few different variations of it. Heck, you even brought James Harden back in, and you didn't play James Harden basketball. You still played Joel Embiid basketball. And this team has figured it out. It's taken a long time, but Maxey is a very good number 2 for Joel Embiid. Paul George makes a lot of sense in terms of forming this big three. And I do think they finally got the guys that make sense. Kelly Oubre had a great year for them last year. I think Caleb Martin makes a ton of sense for them. They have enough ball handling. They have enough versatility. I think the roster fits. I think you have the star at the very top who is that kind of guy who you can win a championship with in Joel Embiid. At least, when we're considering if you have one of the best 5 guys in the NBA, Joel Embiid still needs to prove it in the playoffs, obviously. But this is the roster to prove it with, isn't it? Like, this is it, man. Like, you are out of excuses if it doesn't work this year. I'm not trying to do a whole Joel Embiid radio segment, is he clutch or not thing, but that's what it is. My question to you is if I wanted to try to take the Knicks side of this, because I do think there's one other team I would bring up in the East, but a tier below these teams, but I just think it would be worth mentioning. I'll save that for a second. But if I was going to take the Knicks side of it, I would argue 4 through 8 is, I think, superior to Philadelphia's 4 through 8. My only question is, do you agree? And if so, by how much, right? So I would take the Knicks' top 3. I would just say Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, Mikal Bridges. That's their top 3. I would put Anunoby as their 4th best player. Mitchell Robinson, Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, and then you've got Miles McBride, Precious Achiuwa. Take your pick for like their 8th guy there, but those are your 8 and 9. So you got Anunoby, Mitchell Robinson, DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Deuce McBride. Versus Philadelphia's kind of 4 through 8. Kelly Oubre, Caleb Martin, Kyle Lowry, Eric Gordon, and Yabusele, that Andre Drummond kind of mix there. What back half of the roster do you like more?
The Knicks.
Yeah. By how much? Like leaps and bounds better? Because I think I'm there.
It's a good... I think it has to be leaps and bounds just because like you get out of Bridges, like DiVincenzo, Hart.
They're awesome.
Like Anunoby, these guys are all like very well paid, but they're all like DiVincenzo. Like Cleveland would be like, can 2 firsts for Dante DiVincenzo this way? Like he was that good at stretches last year. Yeah. Hart is like the most like dogged, tough role player that you have in the league right now, and just can absorb a ton of minutes last year and was fine. And I don't know if I would do that year over year, but like he's capable of that if you need to tap into that. Anunoby, when healthy, is just like revered as one of the best defenders in the league. And like if that's your fourth best guy, that is just better than Kelly Oubre is your fourth best guy, or get Yabusele is your fourth best guy. Like that is like you have like fringe all-star kind of guys. Like even if we could look at Philly and say they have 3 all-stars this year, and then you look at the Knicks top 3 and say like I probably think Brunson's the only one I would say I would feel great about being an all-star this year.
You're getting every other year Julius Randle now. So
Yeah,
he could be all NBA. So
yeah, could be all NBA. Could be second team all NBA this year. Who knows? You're right. But it's just one of those things where it's pretty remarkable, Wes, that like the Knicks, to their credit, like have just that is their identity. Like having a deep ass rotation is just a really strong identity.
Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo was arguably New York's second most important offensive player in the playoffs last year, right? With Julius Randle out, Dante DiVincenzo was sort of the second option behind Jalen Brunson. And then Josh Hart, you could argue, was their second best player, when you consider both ends of the court. There were times where he just was their second best player in the playoffs. So, now you're looking at them as their 5th, 6th, 7th guys in the rotation. That's huge because you've got guys who have played real playoff minutes and in real stakes, and they're not like they can just be them. They're not being they're not carrying more weight than they're capable of. In fact, they're probably being underutilized. But you often see teams that win championships have guys who are underutilized, right? That's the whole thing. Like Drew Holiday last year for the Celtics did not do everything that he's capable of. You think about these super teams, or not even super teams, but these loaded teams that win championships. How many of the guys in the rotation are always talking about, hey, we got to sacrifice this and that, and I'm sacrificing touches and all these things for the greater good. The Knicks do have that shape about them, and they do have guys that are going to be asked to do that. I just still think for as superior as the Knicks 4-8 is over the Sixers 4-8 isn't bad, and their top 3 is so much better than New York's. I think you can legitimately have 3 All-NBA guys in Philadelphia this year. I would be very surprised. The Julius Randle jokes aside, I would be very surprised if you had more than one All-NBA guy from the Knicks. And you could argue that Jalen Brunson might have had, like, would it surprise you if when he retires, we look at last year as his best season?
No, I think, but that also speaks to just how fucking good he was last year, and like that is just it's just like a lot. It's a hard level to maintain. It's not that he's not good. It's just that it's like that is such a high bar if you're trying to reach.
And he's never been there before,
right? Exactly.
Right? And I'm not want to do this like whole Jalen Brunson doubter thing. That dude's a baller, man. Like that guy hoops, and I have nothing but confidence in him. And I would put money on him making All NBA next year. But I also feel really good about Joel Embiid making All NBA next year, and also probably Paul George, and perhaps Tyrese Maxey. So those are those two. I think you and I agree, though, in terms of outside of Boston, it's Philadelphia and then probably New York.